It's Tuesday, November 6th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Granthermes. Today in the show, Democrats win big in elections across the country, but does it matter? And what can we learn from these wins? I'm going to talk about the races for governor in New Jersey, Virginia, the very closely watched race in New York between Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo, and the vote in California on whether the state is going to redistrict to counter the gerrymandering that President Trump has been asking for/ordering in red states. But all of that matters even if you don't live in those places, because it's our first look at how voters are responding to what the Trump administration and the Republican-controlled government have been doing recently. But first, make sure that you're following or subscribed to the show, whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below if you're a watcher on YouTube. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got brand new articles going up all the time. You can sign up for free. Paid subscribers, it is just $5 a month. You get access to all sorts of great bonus content. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. It's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. All right, let's get to the show. You know, with the holidays around the corner, we're all going to parties, whether it's with your family, maybe it's a Friendsgiving, or the office holiday party where you're never really sure what to bring. Well, cookies will always do the trick. And with Molly B's gourmet cookies, you can bring bold, artistic craft cookies to your next party or even just to your own pantry. Each cookie is made in small batches to ensure a melt-in-your-mouth texture, exceptional quality, and unforgettable flavors. The Straight Fire, the one I like, marshmallows, chocolate, cinnamon cereal, and just a little bit of cinnamon whiskey. The Be Cordial is a delicious blend of chocolate and cherry. Or the Naughty Cookie, just in time for the holidays. It's a rich, warm chocolate, a subtle hint of spice, topped with fluffy mini marshmallows. It is the perfect balance of naughty and nice for this season. So whether gifting or just indulging on your own, Molly B's cookies elevate any moment, bringing gourmet delight to your pantry with no cookie shop required. And now you can enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code MIMS25 at Molly B's to get 10% off your next order. Now, Make It Make Sense does get a commission off that sale, but you get to support the show and you can wow all your guests at your next party. Molly B's gourmet cookies, bold, unforgettable flavors. They're the ultimate treat for any occasion. Tuesday night was election night this week. There were races across the country at the state and local levels, and pretty much wherever you looked, Democrats were winning, from governor's races to sheriff's races to statewide ballot questions. It was not a good night for the Trump agenda, but it also might not have been as good of a night for Democrats going forward, which I'm going to talk about a little later. But let's start with these races, and let's start actually for the governor in Virginia and New Jersey. Both states were states that voted for Harris in 2024. Virginia by 260,000 votes, New Jersey by 252,000 votes or so. In Virginia, the governor-elect, which is what you call someone who has won their race but hasn't been sworn in yet, is Abigail Spanberger. She won by a huge margin, like 15% more than her opponent. She's a more moderate Democrat who spent a lot of her campaign talking specifically about the cuts to federal workers, mostly from the Doge and Elon Musk cuts earlier this year. Now, Virginia has more than 134,000 people who work for the federal government in their state, making it the second highest federal employee state after California. Virginia also includes a lot of high-profile offices like Quantico, where the FBI Academy is, Langley, where the CIA is, and the entire Pentagon is in Arlington, Virginia. So, almost all of the Department of Defense is there in that state. Now, federal workers make up a huge part of Virginia's state economy and make the relationship that Virginia's governor has with the president, and I mean any president, not just this one, very, very important. Spanberger also ran on the cost of living, affordability, especially in those government work-centered cities where the high cost of living that's in Washington, D.C. has started to bleed into Virginia over the last few years. Now, the government shutdown also rocked Virginia in the last month of this race, which only served to help Spanberger and hurt her Republican opponent, Winsome Earl Sears. Earl Sears was also hurt by the fact that she wasn't endorsed by Trump. He didn't cross the Potomac to meet her at a campaign stop, even though he easily could have. And it has to be said that Earl Sears is a black woman and a Jamaican immigrant. Now, I'm not saying that those things explicitly played into why Trump didn't endorse her, but she is the current lieutenant governor of Virginia. Trump backed her on the ticket when the current governor was running in 2021, a white guy named Glenn Youngkin. Earl Sears has basically promised not to change a thing about the Republican approach to being governor of Virginia, and Trump also frequently insults black women in Congress. His favorite is calling them low IQ. He's made it a habit to target cities around the country that are run by black mayors, an outsized number of those by black women. His administration is also actively working to stop immigrants of color from coming into the U.S. legally and illegally, specifically from the Caribbean. So an endorsement from Trump for a black woman and an immigrant kind of cuts against everything his White House has set out to do and has been doing. Now, it wasn't all about a lack of Trump, which this actually makes it a good place to jump to New Jersey. In New Jersey, the Democratic candidate there, Mikey Sherrill, she won by 13 points over Jack Ciattarelli. Her victory was so decisive that the race was called less than 15 minutes after the polls closed, meaning in like 13 minutes, it was mathematically impossible for Sherrill to lose. That is practically unheard of. Sherrill, like Spanberger, is a more moderate Democrat. She also ran on the cost of living, specifically high energy prices, partly because New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the country, meaning there's a lot of demand for power. But because it's the fourth smallest state in the country, I like to think of it as kind of the skin tag of the East Coast, there's not a lot of land to build power plants to meet that demand, so the state has to import a lot of its power. Ironically, New Jersey also has some of the most energy pipelines for things like natural gas or nuclear-powered electricity, but that gets distributed to other states on the East Coast. Now, normally, running on something like energy prices is a tough sell to voters because it's complicated, and there's not a lot a governor can do to bring those prices down, especially in densely populated states. But this race got the attention from Trump for a few of those reasons. First, when it does come to energy, Trump recently relaunched a program to kickstart more nuclear power plants in the U.S. It's something he likes, and honestly, I kind of don't know why, other than he really doesn't like windmills. But New Jersey gets about 40% of its power from nuclear power plants, making it one of the more nuclear states. It's up there, but not the most. Now, second, Trump has a personal connection to New Jersey, having run and then bankrupted a casino in Atlantic City. Third, a ton of people who live in Jersey cross over the border to work in New York every day, which, despite not living in New York anymore, it's still his hometown, and Trump still cares about it. And finally, getting a Republican into the governor's office in New Jersey could help serve as a check on a democratically controlled New York State and New York City, because all three, New Jersey, New York, and New York City, have to work so closely together. So Trump actually endorsed Jack Ciattarelli in this race, even though Ciattarelli called Trump an embarrassment during his first run for office in 2015. So it actually seems like here, Trump's endorsement hurt the Republican candidate. It was pretty clear that Democratic voters, angry at Trump, at his policies, at the economy, turned out because of this endorsement just as much as they turned out because they liked Mikey Sherrill. And instead of a Trump endorsement energizing Republican voters, they kind of just seem to shrug their shoulders at it. But I'll have more on that in a second because that is something people are talking about. Now, before I get to New York City, I do have to really quickly talk about the California ballot measure to redistrict the state known as Prop 50. It was an overwhelming win for Democrats, and particularly the Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom, who is 100% going to be running for president in 2028. Mark my words here. Now, that proposition, Prop 50, would redistrict the state in the middle of the decade, which is not normally how things work, but it was put on the ballot to explicitly counter what Trump has been asking/ordering Republican states to do to make sure that the GOP gets more seats in the House in 2026. If California can get this map redrawn and approved by the midterms, it's a tall ask. Democrats would likely gain 5 seats in Congress, though probably not enough to offset what red states are doing right now. Now, Republicans have already sued to block this map on racial discrimination grounds against white people. An ironic sort of twist, given how the Republican-led Supreme Court is likely going to get rid of racial protections in voting, something I've talked about a bunch before, but most recently with Dave Daley from a couple weeks ago. If you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to it. Nonetheless, this is a signal that Democrats in the most populated state in the country, at the very least, want Democrats to take a much more fight fire with fire approach to politics. And actually, now let's move on to the thing that I think most of you have heard of by now. And if you're a younger, more liberal voter, you've probably heard a lot about this. It's Zohran Mamdani's victory to become the youngest mayor of New York in decades. Mamdani ran as a democratic socialist, promising free buses in New York, rent control, a government-run grocery store system to compete with existing chains, among other things. He was running against disgraced former governor Andrew Cuomo and the Republican Curtis Sliwa, but it was really Mamdani and Cuomo in this race, despite Sliwa being a personal friend at one point in time of Donald Trump's. Now, I say Cuomo was disgraced because he is. The New York governor's office had to settle with the Biden Department of Justice after they found Cuomo had sexually harassed at least 13 staffers. He resigned over it and then thought he could come back and run to be the most powerful mayor in the country. But also, I guess the president is someone who was found liable for sexual assault twice, where the judge in one of those said it was tantamount to rape. So I suppose everything's made up and the points don't matter anymore. Anyway, Mamdani won this race by about 9 points, which is still a decisive win over an establishment Democrat like Cuomo. Trump also endorsed Cuomo, basically saying the city had no other option because Mamdani, as a democratic socialist, is the same thing as a communist. And as a side note here, and maybe this is something that I should do for the Substack, we gotta get our definition straight on socialism versus communism versus nationalism, because those get thrown around a lot as the same thing, and they just aren't. Words matter. Maybe not in the modern world of American politics, but, here it make sense. They still do. Again, anyway, Trump has been threatening to withhold funding from New York or possibly send troops into New York if Mamdani won, and he still might come January 1st when Mamdani is sworn in. Although, given these threats from Trump, it's likely that they'd be used against Trump in any kind of lawsuit that would be brought about withholding funds or sending troops into the city. But the thing the Mamdani race really brings into sharp focus here is just how divided the Democrats are and what they think their vision should be to counter the party of Trump. Mamdani didn't get any major endorsements from establishment Democrats. The highest-ranking Democrat, New York Senator Chuck Schumer, refused to endorse him and then wouldn't say who he voted for, only saying, "I voted, and I look forward to working with the next mayor," which, yikes, that does not sound like a guy who voted for the winner here. President Obama called Mamdani himself to offer himself up as a mentor of sorts, but stopped short of actually endorsing him. Although the head of the Democratic National Committee, so effectively the Democratic Party machine, did endorse Mamdani, and so did Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but there wasn't a blanket endorsement or real support across the board from Democratic elites. So Democrats on this were all over the map. And I'm going to have Amanda Littman from Run for Something, who had a direct hand in Mamdani's win, on the show to talk about the disconnect within the Democratic Party here, on the show in a couple of weeks after some of the dust settles, so look for that in your feeds. But as a whole, these elections this week were sort of the political equivalent to an Applebee's appetizer sampler for the midterm elections. In reacting to all of the Democratic wins, there have been a few Republican takeaways. The first one is this one from Michigan's Lisa McClain, who is the head of the Republican conference in the House, a pretty high-up leadership position.
It's hard to see anything last night that was an endorsement of what the Republican Party is doing right now.
Yeah, well, let me give you the other side of that story. Is voter turnout from Republicans was not high. Not high at all. But I think part of that reason is because Republicans, for the most part, are happy with what's happening. The border's closed. Crime is down. Inflation under Biden used to be 9%. It's now down to 3%. Interest rates are down. Mortgage is down. Let me just finish. Let me just give you the other side. I shop at the same grocery store as everybody else does.
So you
is there more work that needs to be done? Absolutely there is.
So I know that sounds like weird reverse logic, but she's right. People who are angry tend to vote more, and people who vote in what we call off-year elections, that's elections that happen in years where there isn't a national race happening, they tend to be the most angry and the most politically involved. And on the other side of that, people who are happy with what's happening tend not to turn out to vote. But there's also an interesting thing to unpack here too, because It's really about the future of the Republican Party. And actually, this is where Donald Trump got it right. Not something I say a lot on this show, but credit where it's due. He posted on social media that the cause for Republicans getting trounced this week were two things: the government shutdown and that he wasn't on the ballot. And those two things are generally right. Trump animates his voters in a way that no politician really has done since Obama in 2007. His supporters, Trump's, want to vote for him, not even necessarily the people he endorses. They like Trump the man, which means everything in Republican politics right now flows from Trump the person, not Trump as the president or the head of the Republican Party or even Republican ideology, because Trump is the ideology. And it raises the big question about what happens in a post-Trump world. If, in the end, what the now MAGA-fied Republican Party is really a loose set of unpopular ideas being held together by a single guy, it's going to make building a post-Trump party really hard. And also, we know that their ideas are unpopular because Trump's handling of every major issue, from crime to immigration to prices, are all below 50% support right now, some below 30% support in a recent YouGov poll for the Right of Center Economist magazine. I also think it's worth pointing out that Trump mentioned the government shutdown because it's something that he knows is hurting Republicans, even though he's gone out of his way to try and make it all the Democrats' fault, despite refusing to fund SNAP, healthcare benefits, shutting down 10% of U.S. air travel in an unprecedented move during the busiest travel time of the year, and having full control of the government, but also refusing to start negotiations to reopen the government that he controls. Voters blame Republicans and Trump more than they do Democrats for the shutdown because they see all of that too. In the end, what this little mini-midterm really tells us is that people are generally unhappy with Trump and the Republican vision going forward. Republican voters aren't backing their party's vision as much as they're loyal to Trump, and Democrats still haven't found a way to get their act together. All of that is to say, it is going to be a very chaotic next year as we speed toward the midterms, which are exactly a year away. All right, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show whenever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. It really helps out the show. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. You can do that for free to get access to all of the free newsletters during the week. If you want to become a paid subscriber for $5 a month, you get access to all sorts of original reporting and analysis I drop. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Granthermes, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.